So week 2 of the beta started yesterday. This is where they open up the realm where you get the max level characters, you get the tier sets, you get the max gear, all this stuff. You can do keys. The keys scale your gear, depending on what key you're in. And I thought it would be a good time to go through some of the changes and do an overall AUG beta review. Just because in the leveling process, in dungeons and like regulars and heroics, things died really quickly. It was kind of hard to get a feel for how it actually felt, like how the gameplay actually felt, because things would just fall over, so you never really got to experience it. So I ran some keys yesterday. I did a couple 12s, and so far AUG's feeling really good. So let's get into a full beta review of AUG. All right, the first thing I want to talk about is some key changes. Okay, so we're going to go through some of the talents and we're going to review some of the key changes. First of which, obviously, being Ebon Might. Ebon Might increases all damage dealing allies primary stat by 8% of your own. This is actually up from 5% on live, so you get a little bit bigger buff, and it affects all your damage dealing allies. So when you're in a raid, it's going to affect all the DPS in the raid, and in dungeons it only affects the other DPS with you, not the tank or the healer. The big thing about this is, like I said, in raid it affects the entire raid, which in a mythic raid where you're limited to 20 people, you have about 13 DPS typically, and that spreads out equally across them. So this is how the math breaks down. In dungeons, each person that you have, the other two people, get 8% each. In raid, and as soon as you expand beyond those two people, it takes that total of 16%, the 8% for two, and splits that evenly. So for example, 8% each to two people, and then you add a third in the mix, and then each person gets 5.3%. Then you add a fourth in the mix, and each person gets 4%, and so on and so forth. Now, like I said, in raid, you have about 13 DPS because you are not included, and it's going to give about 1.2% of your primary stat to everybody. So we're kind of waiting to see if this is better or worse than it was before, where you had 4 people get 5%, or now you have 13 people get 1.2%. So we're going to have to feel it out when the raid goes live, and we can test to see if it's actually better or worse. I think it's going to be fine, but we'll have to see kind of how it affects everybody. The next key change is Imminent Destruction. Imminent Destruction reduces the essence cost of your eruptions by 1. On live, it's a buff you get for, I think, 10 to 12 seconds, and every eruption you cast in that window is reduced by 1 essence, so it only costs 1 essence, whereas now you get the next 6 eruptions are reduced by 1 essence. It's not that big of a change. On live, you get about 8 or 9 realistically, and you're kind of chasing this buff. I kind of like this better, even though it's less, because I feel like I can do other things in the mix and not be missing out on my Imminent Destruction, because I know that it's just the next 6. It's not limited to a buff window. So if there's a mechanic or something happens, I don't have hover up, I gotta move, when you have that time buff, you're losing eruptions. But with here, at least you know that whatever you have, if you have 4 left and you have to do a big movement or something like that, you're going to keep that 4 until after the movement. So I personally like this change. I don't know how everybody feels about it, but I like it. I like knowing exactly how many eruptions I can get out with them only costing 1, and I can kind of plan around it. If I know that this is my last eruption cast, I don't need to try to squeeze one in and beat that buff. So I like this change. Next, we got Inferno's Blessing. Inferno's Blessing got pretty juiced up. I think they increased it by like 700% spell power or something like that. So this is actually a pretty good talent now, and it also increases the moats talent, because one of the moats buff you got was Inferno's Blessing, and for a long time it sucked. So you were kind of hoping not to get it, and now it's pretty good to the point where it's a buff that you get from moats. It's okay to get. It's actually pretty solid. So yeah, Inferno's Blessing is now not a bad buff, and moats now has 2 out of 3 buffs being good instead of just 1. Now the next change is Prescience, and this kind of affects moats as well. Due to this talent Clairvoyant, Moats of Possibility may now grant Prescience and has a 10% increased chance to activate. So now you have Prescience, you have Shifting Sands, and you have Inferno's Blessing, which is 3 out of 4 of the buffs you get from moats being good buffs for you. So moats is substantially better. It was good before, it's better now. And also, you have a 10% increased chance to activate. I feel like I constantly am chasing moats when I'm in keys, and it's good. I feel like everybody just has like all the buffs on them all the time, and some of the times I'm avoiding them because I can look at my DPS. They both have Shifting Sands, they both have Inferno's Blessings. Everybody in my group's got Prescience. and I'm kind of just almost avoiding them sometimes. So I think that this is a very good change, and I think that this makes moats feel very, very strong. That all being said, I think that last tier there was, you know, you could auto cast your prescience or you could pick your DPS specifically in dungeons, and it was always like such a minor thing if you auto casted versus if you specifically picked. It was like less than 1% of a difference, and I think that range is going to get way smaller. Because if your DPS already have prescience on them, you're gonna want to put it on somebody who doesn't have it. And with moats giving all these presciences out, you know, I think that it might be completely fine to just auto cast it and just make sure that your prescience is going to somebody who doesn't have it, rather than someone who, as you were mousing over them, hit a moat and now you just double buff them with it. You know, I think the gap between auto cast and specific cast is going to be far shorter, which makes it a little easier in keys. In raid, I think you're still going to want to pick specific people, and I also think it's going to become more reactionary because we don't really have any targeted buffs anymore. So I think you're going to want to, you know, just pick in cooldowns the people who are doing the most and give them prescience, give them a little extra crit, and then in dungeons I think that auto cast is going to be fine. Now we've got some honorable mentions. They're not massive changes, but they are either a nice quality of life or just something that's like a nice little addition to AUG. One of which is regenerative chitin. So this used to be that when you casted Eruption, it would recharge blistering scales. Now there's no more charges and it deals more damage. The damage is not huge, but it's a really nice quality of life to be able to just put this on your tank, the blistering scales, and then if there's something happens where you just can't get an Eruption off, you know, all the charges go pretty quickly, you don't have to worry about keeping it up. I also really like that I can just put this on in like a raid or something like that too, and I can set it and forget it. I don't need to worry about making sure that it's reapplied and so on and so forth. So I actually like this nice little quality of life change. The next one is stretch time. So stretch time moved to the clash tree, and it increased the amount of damage that it would stretch from 50% to 100%. So while flying during Breath of Eons, 100% of the damage you would take is instead dealt over 10 seconds. Now, you're still not holding Eons for a damage reduction, but if they happen to line up, it's actually pretty nice. You know, there's a couple times that I was doing a boss and like right when I was going to cast, he started casting some big AoE, and I was like, oh, perfect. You know, I get a little DR here. Like I said, you're not holding for it, but if it lines up, it's nice. Lastly is rescue. So rescue went from having that rescue shield attached to it. Now instead, Twin Guardian increases movement speed by 100% and allows spells to be cast while moving for 3.3 seconds. Now this is you and the person you rescue. So if I rescue the healer, even if I just rescue him in place, they will now have the ability to move and cast for 3 seconds. So I think that rescue is going to become more of a situational, like, okay, the healer needs to be able to move and cast, so to give it to the healer, or somebody needs to move and cast, so give it to them. And it's going to be used more as a utility based rather than a defensive based. And I'm on the fence about it. I think it's cool, but I use that shield all the time. I would always just rescue people right where they were standing. We'd both get a shield, sometimes to save me, sometimes to save them. So I personally like the other shield more, but we'll have to see how much benefit this gets in practice. And lastly, the new talent, Strike from Above. Glide speed and height increased by 20%. I really like this talent. I've been playing Havoc Demon Hunter a ton on retail, and going from his double jump and glide to AUG having that simple glide, it kind of threw me off a little bit. This makes it feel much better. You get height, you get distance. If you double tap your glide to open it and then close it, you still get that distance out of it, and it's just a really good mobility talent. All right, let's talk a little bit about the Apex talents. The Apex talents are the new part of the expansion. They're these talents right over here, and they're just kind of like super talents, honestly. And I think that AUG kind of hit the jackpot with it. So first one is Duplicate. Breath of Beyond summons a version of you from the future to assist you in battle lasting 20 seconds. Your duplicate casts Eruption, Empowered Spells, and Living Flame. So this is different from the goons we had from the tier set in the last expansion, because those only casted Pyre in the air and Disintegrate. This casts your Empowered Spells and your Eruptions, which are good damage dealing abilities. Now, because Scale Commander has such a short cooldown on Eons due to bombardments, you have this guy up with you a lot. It lasts 20 seconds. It starts after you land, and then lasts for 20 seconds. And then you also have anytime you extend Ebon Might, your duplicate is also extended, equal to 100% of the amount you extended from Ebon Might. So you cast Eons, you land, it summons for 20 seconds, you start ripping your Eruption, and every time your Eruption hits, it's adding to your duplicate. So it lets it stay up for longer and longer and longer. And you have a pretty good uptime. Like, this thing lasts a good amount of time after you land. And it's nice. One of the things he casts is the empowered spells, one of which being Upheaval, and it actually knocks your enemies up. So you kind of have like a secondary knock up in your rotation from it. And now lastly, the biggest Apex talent, the last one you get, when your duplicate is active, your Ebon Might grants 100% additional stats. So going back to Ebon Might, in dungeons, each person gets 8%. Now each person gets 16%. In raid, with 13 people, everybody gets 1.2. Now they all get 2.4%. And you also, your increase to your own damage goes from 20% to 40%, which is why that 2% nerf from retail to beta isn't a big deal, because when you pop your Eons, you get a 40% increase to your damage. So this is a fantastic talent. And then, like I said, it's while your duplicate is active, you have this extending your duplicate as much as you're extending your Ebon Might. So you have a lot of uptime on big buffs to yourself and your allies. It is very impactful. And I have noticed that in my logs and keys, Ebon Might is doing a fair amount of damage. I think it's like top 3 for damage. And that's primarily because of this talent. Overall, I think we have very strong Apex talents. There is still plenty of time for it to be tuned, so how strong they're going to be on live will be determined by that. But numbers aside, I think the duplicate is super cool. It fits the class fantasy, and even if they adjust the damage, I think the doubling of Ebon Might will still make it a very, very strong Apex talent. So I'm happy about these. They feel really good, and I think it's really cool that you have a duplicate from yourself. He comes out of a portal, and he just starts fighting with you, and he does. And the big thing is the empowered spells, the knockups, the fire breath, all of those things kind of contribute to everything else you're doing. Great Apex talents. Very excited to see what hopefully they make it to live as strong as they are right now, because they're really enjoyable. All right, the last thing I want to talk about is the tier set. So we have the 2 set being Eruption damage increased by 15% and extends Ebon Might by an additional 0.5 seconds. So every time you cast Eruption, it extends Ebon Might by 1.5 seconds instead of 1. And then while Ebon Might is active, empowered spells deal 20% more damage and cool down 20% faster. So with these two things combined, I did a video a little while back about how to be a better AUG on retail. And it was kind of explaining how to maximize your Ebon Might uptime without draining yourself of essence and not being able to have an Ebon Might ready. Now, with this tier set, that's going to change, because with the extra extensions you get from empowered spells, from eruptions, if you crit eruptions, it's like 2.2 seconds increased. It's changing the dynamic for extending Ebon Mights. It's easier in the sense that you get more time out of it. Right now, I think going in with, as a new expansion, we're obviously not going to be geared like this. You're going to have a lot less haste, so it is going to be a little harder to maintain. But once you get some haste and once you get the tier set, it feels like you can get 2 empowered spells or sets of empowered spells in each Ebon Might window, and you can really kind of push the limit for how long you can get Ebon Might up. And I want to do some more testing to see like what's a proper method for it. But there's times that I've had like 10 seconds left, I have Ebon Might back up, and both of my empowered spells are up. And on retail, I probably would have held and just built back up, but I think it might be a little different. So we're going to do a video on that in the future. So if you're interested in, that kind of gameplay loop, keep an eye out for that. Now, I know everyone wants to know, how good is AUG? I want to preface this by saying that this is beta. These numbers mean essentially nothing, especially week 2. Maybe last week you could get away with talking some numbers, but we are so early in the beta that it's difficult to tell exactly how good it's going to be in 5-man, and we still haven't even raid tested yet. So we don't have an exact numbers to say this is going to be meta, this is not going to be meta, this is going to be middle of the pack. All I can say is right now, logging my dungeons, I've logged all my keys, and AUG is doing very good. I'm going to bring up a log right now Okay, so this is a log from a 12 Algathere I did the other day. I was with 2 Devourer Demon Hunters, and I did very well in it. Now, it is very reliant on your other 2 DPS, because if we want to look at augmented damage, this is what you'll see on details. I am below the tank. So what you're gonna say, I said details, but on the WoW damage meter, they're not attributing aug damage, so you're not gonna see your actual damage on that in-game damage meter. You need to be logging. So when you look at it like this, your bottom of the barrel, that's what you're gonna see on your damage meter, but your actual damage is pretty good. Now this is another one, another Alcathere 12 I did. I had a Destro lock that was absolutely cooking, and then I had a Demon Hunter that was probably just learning the spec. It's a brand new spec, so I'm not too concerned about that. But I was able to do good damage, keeping up with this guy who was ripping. And I think if I had another guy who was kind of doing that level of damage too, I would have just been massive. So right now, the numbers are good, but like I said, this is beta. If there's ever a time to ignore numbers and focus on, smooth gameplay and feel and making sure that it's a fun class to play, then it is 100% right now. You want to make sure the class feels good. You want to make sure that it's not clunky. You want to make sure that everything just kind of flows. You're not getting bugs. Don't worry about damage stuff. Damage stuff's going to change. We could get nerfed tomorrow by 50% and fall right down. We could also get buffed. Other classes could get buffed. Other classes could get nerfed. So right now, don't be too concerned with damage. Just make sure that you enjoy the play style of it. And if you do, then worry about damage second. Figure out damage when it goes live. Otherwise, get out there, start testing on beta. If you find anything wrong, make sure you're giving feedback. That's what beta's for. And yeah, overall, I think in the beta, Aug's feeling really good to play. I think that with the tier set and the easier extensions, once you get some haste, like the Ebon Might uptime and the Ebon Might loop with your empowered spells, it all feels really good to me personally. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing how this gets to live and if anything changes from it. So my overall rating is good for Aug. They are feeling really good. Feels fun to play. The numbers are good, but like I said, it's beta. It's the second week of beta. Don't stress the numbers. They're going to change. So that being said, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Until next time.